Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. After a pretty long break, my first video regarding the 2019 season, and we're looking at the NFL draft, starting off with quarterbacks. I got my top 5, and I got Brian Sullivan from MadMen Sports in the house once again. He's going to assist me a little bit, give some opinions on my grading. So I've gotten the time after taking my final exams to study some quarterback tape, and here's my top 5. So we're going to start off with Drew Lock out of Missouri. He's my number 1 quarterback for this year's draft. He's 6'3", 223 pounds. He ran a 4.69 40, which is really good. He has elite arm strength and good enough accuracy. Stands very tall in the pocket, has good vision, and can push the ball down the field. I like the way that he moves his eyes. He has natural reading and game managing ability. Very good at touch and fastballs. Good control over his arm. His 40 time is not the greatest, but it's good enough for a quarterback. He's mobile enough to play in any NFL scheme. And I've said it before, and I will say it again. Deep out routes, the hardest route for a quarterback to throw correctly. He's the closest to Sam Darnold of the bunch that we have this year, in my opinion. And he's getting the ball all over the field. He can get it everywhere, and those deep out routes are really the route that I'm looking for the most when scouting quarterbacks and their ability to really push down the field. He does have some downsides, and also those are still similar to Sam Darnold's. He likes to take a lot of risks when he doesn't necessarily have to, and sometimes shouldn't. He doesn't have the cleanest technique, but that can be worked on. His footwork definitely does need improvement, and he sometimes is reckless and takes risks into some coverages that he should not test. He does need stable coaching, which he hasn't gotten so far in college to fix these issues, so that's not a true concern. I'm looking at very fixable issues, which can turn him into an elite starter within 2 or 3 years in the NFL. I have some pro comparisons for him, and I see his style somewhere between Jay Cutler and Andrew Luck, and I believe that in terms of production, he will turn out to be somewhere in between those guys as well. I got a late first-round grade on him, specifically because the quarterback class isn't that strong, but I project him to go between 10 and 20 in the first round. I'm looking at the Dolphins, Chargers, and Bengals for Drew Lock, and I think he's going to be one of the better picks in that first round. So, Brian, what's your opinion?
Wow, Alex, I gotta say, I feel like I was reading my own notes while you were speaking there, because I pretty much agree with everything you said. I don't have him as my number 1 quarterback. I do also have a late first-round grade on him. Spoiler, I really don't have even a mid-first-round grade on many of the quarterbacks in this class. So I'm with you there. And yeah, I'm with you. In general, I really like the seniors in this class. He really displayed a lot of maturity. I saw him communicating with his offensive line a lot, and he did a really nice job of going through his progressions. You mentioned the deep out routes. I like that he had a few really nicely timed back shoulder throws. I think that's another very tough pass to make. Shows that he's got good chemistry with his wide receivers. And yeah, you are right that sometimes he does take some risks. He forces some throws off of his back foot a few too many times when he's in danger. I especially noticed that against Georgia. I give him a little bit of a pass because Georgia is such a star-studded defense, but still it was a little concerning. And then one other thing, for a senior, this was one play in particular against Florida that really stood out to me. Sure, it was just an anomaly, but it's something that I really hope his coaches went over with him. There was one play where the defense jumped off sides, and the flag was thrown, and he still just kind of checked it down. And I really wish he had the awareness in a situation like that to do what some of the guys in the pros do, where you just take a shot deep and see what happens. Again, just one example. It's not a be-all, end-all type of play, but those are the types of things where I'd like to see him process things quicker. And you mentioned his mechanics. I agree. His throw is a little too much of a wind-up almost, where it gives these defensive backs some time to really read where he's going. Like you said, I like what he does with his eyes and the way he progresses, but because of how long he takes to wind up the throw, it'll make some really elite linebackers, safeties, defensive backs. They'll be able to telegraph where the pass is going just because it'll give them enough time to give it away. But I like his build, I like his maturity, and I'm with you. I think that he'll be taken probably in the mid-first round, a little early because, like you said, this isn't a very strong class. And I think he has the chance to be a pretty solid starter. Don't think he has superstar potential, but I think he's a pretty safe pick.
All right, great, thank you. Let's get into number 2. I have Daniel Jones out of Duke, and this might be a little bit of controversy already. He's 6'5", 220 pounds. He's built like a quarterback. Very intelligent. He understands the game, and he knows where everyone will be on the field, which is an underrated quality in my opinion. Accuracy for him is a strong point. He can get the ball everywhere he needs to on the field. One of the best arms in the class. Has a good touch and good arm strength. Nothing elite, but good enough. Great size, 6'5", and his mobility is good enough. Sneaky good. He has accuracy on the run. He can escape from the pocket and still make those throws. And as a runner, because of his size and his decent 40 time, which is a 4.81, he can pick up those third and shorts on the ground for you. Expect him to be one of the top QBs when the Wonder League scores are publicized, which at the time of recording are not, but I'm expecting him to top in the high 30s there. Coachable with great upside. He's kind of the Josh Allen of this draft, if I can draw another comparison there. He does have some downsides. His timing sometimes is still pretty poor. He needs to develop more maturity as opposed to Drew Lock. He will learn to throw it away when he needs to, which he hasn't demonstrated so far. So some unnecessary turnovers and some bad risks that he occasionally takes. He's currently holding the football too long for NFL pass rush to really get it done. But that's stuff that he will learn as he develops discipline under NFL coaching, and he needs a lot of reps to adjust that internal clock and get into the rhythm of pro football. His pro comparison for me is Eli Manning. There's another parallel there with his head coach in college, Cutcliffe, having once recruited Eli Manning to Ole Miss and coached him there. So and also from his mechanics, I see a lot of parallels. I have a late first to early second round grade on him. I'm projecting him to still be a late first rounder, and I'm looking at the Jacksonville Jaguars specifically.
Okay, yeah. So unlike Drew Lock, we don't really have the same take on Daniel Jones. He's not in my top 5. I will say, listening to you talk about him, though, I know you know your stuff, makes me want to go and watch more of his film, maybe rewatch it. I think I just picked a really bad game. I watched his game against Miami. The weather was terrible, so that's kind of a factor, and I really was not impressed. You mentioned his timing. That seemed like a big weakness to me. A lot of the times when he threw the ball, it felt like the defensive back was right there. Didn't really go through his progressions as much as I would have liked. And again, probably because of the weather, I didn't see him as having a very strong arm, and I'm sure that based on what I've read about him and based on what you're saying here, I'm sure that the weather really did play a factor in that. So again, now I want to go back, really rewatch him. He did have a nice pooch punt, I'll give him that. And he's an okay athlete. He's not, it's not something that's going to make or break him, but he is a good enough athlete to escape from pressure. So I kind of had a 4th, 5th round grade on him, but again, of all the quarterbacks, I don't know if I've watched enough of him to really be that harsh on him. And again, hearing you speak about him, I definitely do want to go back, maybe watch a few of the games again, and see if there was something I was missing on my first watch.
All right, thank you. So, getting right into number 3 and the polar opposite of Daniel Jones, I got the big name Kyler Murray out of Oklahoma, 5'10", 195. He has the right mentality to play football. Kind of took over from Baker Mayfield there in that segment. He's a fierce competitor, has a good arm and good accuracy, not the greatest. He's very athletic, most dangerous runner of the class, and can do it all on the ground. He has a great ability to escape and do serious damage to your defense if you don't contain him on every play. He's a miracle worker on busted plays, that Russell Wilson trait. Elusive as a ball carrier and very fast. Top speed is off the charts for a guy his size. He's accurate enough on the run. But the big downside to Kyler Murray and why I have him at 3 is I'm going to introduce a new stat here, a new measurement that I came up for myself. I'm going to call it height of release. And it's the height above the ground at which a passer will release the football. And it's kind of computed by adding his arm length and his height measured at the combine. I'm going to subtract like 10 inches for the difference between the top of his head to the top of his shoulder, and that's going to be the height of release. And for Kyler Murray, his height of release would be just above 7 feet above the ground with his 28-inch arms and his 5'10" frame. Just as a comparison, Aaron Rodgers, who's by no means known to be the biggest, most imposing guy, that's over half a foot higher, and even Russell Wilson is about 4 inches higher off the ground with his release. And just above 7 feet, that's getting pretty close for comfort with the height of a lot of offensive linemen with their helmets on. And he's going to have troubles in a lot of offensive schemes. He'll have troubles on those 3-step drops, those short, quick throws that he needs to make from a small drop set, and he just physically can't make every throw, specifically those short ones. His accuracy is good, but not great, and because of how the West Coast offense has been dominating in the NFL, almost every single team is running some kind of iteration of West Coast stylized offenses and passing plays with the checkdowns and the quick concepts. That's gonna be an issue, and he's gonna have to navigate around that. I don't think his vision is going to be a big issue, because if you're a quarterback at 5'10" or even shorter than that in college and high school, you'll learn to look between offensive linemen instead of over them. He will never have had a chance to look above the line of scrimmage, so he'll have to use the spaces in between linemen to do that. And quarterbacks do that, so that's fair enough. But his actual physical ability to release the ball is some concern to me. To me, he's not as good of a prospect as the hype surrounding him, but he definitely is an explosive player. He's short and thin, some durability concerns, although I haven't seen him get seriously injured yet. Veteran pro comparison, Russell Wilson, though again, even one step shorter than him. I have a late second round grade for people who like to take risks. I'm projecting him to be a top 10 pick and potentially the number 1 pick. If the hype doesn't die down, I can see either the Cardinals picking him outright, trading Josh Rosen, or the Cardinals trading the pick, which in my opinion would be the right choice, and someone like the Raiders or Giants go grab him at 1.
Yeah, I largely agree with a lot of what you said. I love the attention to detail there with your new metric. I think that there's a lot of logic behind what you're saying. And like you said, he's a fantastic athlete. On day one, he might be the best athlete in the NFL at the quarterback position, maybe excluding a guy like Cam Newton or a guy like Russell Wilson. But he's just a phenomenal athlete. There's a reason he was drafted high in the MLB as well. I will say that his accuracy, I'm not quite sure. He definitely made some very accurate throws, but on the flip side, he was one of the least pressured quarterbacks of any of these prospects at all. A lot of his good throws that I saw him make, he had plenty of time to scan the field, stand in the pocket. He was standing behind a massive offensive line at Oklahoma. And that's where I'm wondering if a lot of his accuracy, are we really, overstating it because he just had more opportunities than some of these other quarterbacks. His receiving core as well was absolutely loaded. Marquise Brown is going to be possibly a star at the next level. He's fantastic. And his footwork really does concern me. He made a lot of just kind of awkward, odd throws. I will say my projection on him really depends on where he ends up. With the right coaching staff, he could be the best quarterback in this class. He just has so much natural ability that it's tough, and it seems like he's got the work ethic, that it's tough to envision that if he goes to the right coaching staff, they could implement a new type of offense that's really built around him. It doesn't need to be traditional, but if he ends up going to kind of a historically inept franchise that doesn't really know how to utilize him, that tries to make those, tries to run an offense based on a lot of those throws you were talking about, that West Coast offense, those 3-step drops, that won't really cater to his strengths, he could end up being maybe like a rookie, a one-year wonder, because he's just so athletically gifted that I feel like his first year, he's going to be a pretty exciting rookie. But as time goes on, there's more film on him. If a coach isn't willing to be creative and kind of find an offense that suits his strengths, he could end up not being great, because just his mechanics could use a lot of work. And again, he was working with so much at Oklahoma, and that's just not how it's going to be in the NFL. He's not going to have 5 to 7 seconds sometimes to stand in the pocket and scan the field and have all day to make those decisions.
All right, thank you. Appreciate that take. I'm just going to throw in this one little fact as well, that Cliff Kingsbury over the last couple of years is at the absolute bottom of all coaches when it comes to yards on the ground by their quarterbacks. So debating on whether Murray is going to fit that Arizona system, I'm personally not seeing it, like you kind of said, but we'll see. And we're going to get number 4. We got 2 more. Number 4, give me Ryan Finley out of NC State. 6'4", 208 pounds, ran a 4.73 at the combine. He's one of the best pure passers in the class, and that I've seen in a couple of years, actually. All around solid thrower. Doesn't really have a major struggle in his passing motion or his accuracy. Good arm, good accuracy, good vision of the field. He's a game manager, underrated player. in times where people are looking for the flashy Kyler Murrays. Technique, anticipation, and timing of a 5 to 10 year NFL veteran. Smart decision maker. He's a game manager. He needs to fit into a system where he doesn't have to do it all by himself. I'm looking at the New England Patriots because that is what Tom Brady does too. And if they're not trading for Josh Rosen, Ryan Finley is a guy that they will have to look twice at, because that's the exact role that they need for their for kind of their game manager in the leading the offensive system. Now, he is mainly a pocket passer. The mobility isn't quite the way you want it to be. I believe his shiftiness isn't quite up to the strength of his 40 time. He's not flashy, but he's very, very solid. Underrated, like I said. He's not the best athlete, and he has no really special physical gifts. Veteran pro comparison: Alex Smith, Tom Brady, that sort of ballpark territory. Good enough in the right system, he can be great. Late second to early third round grade, and I'm projecting him to go in the mid second round.
Yeah, Ryan Finley might actually be my favorite quarterback in this whole class when it comes, especially because, as we've mentioned a few times, this isn't a class with a surefire thing, and he just really checked all the boxes for me. I would like to see him pack on a little more weight. He looks a little thin out there, but he's the prototypical size. He's a solid enough athlete. He is a pocket passer, but he can kind of escape. He has enough mobility to get by. And his accuracy is very good for the most part. He really just delivers a very pretty ball, nice quick release as well. And he does a nice job of delivering the ball on the run, kind of evading pressure, and throwing, delivering accurate passes even when his feet aren't set. And he seemed to have just really good timing with his wide receivers, really good chemistry there. I saw him make some beautiful back shoulder throws that with just perfect timing with his receivers. And him and his receivers always just seem to be on the same page. And that's something that I really like to see. It would have been nice to see him maybe with a team that had a little more talent overall. NC State was fine, but I'm kind of imagining him on that Oklahoma team or him on an Alabama team and kind of seeing what he would have been able to do. And obviously his receivers did help him a lot. They did make some fantastic receptions as well. But I just really like to see that type of maturity and timing. Again, as a senior, you kind of expect it. Does a nice job of scanning the field and going through his progressions. He doesn't really have a single trait that kind of stands out, and that's probably why that's why I'm not saying he's an early first rounder. That's why I still have a late first round grade on him. But he's just so well-rounded that as long as he doesn't go to a travesty of an organization, I could see him being a really nice fit for them. I would really love to see him go to a team like the Chargers or the Steelers or the Saints, a team that's kind of waning on those last few years with their quarterback so that he could sit behind, learn from a vet, pack on some weight, and really come out maybe just guns firing in a few years with a franchise that's already got some talent to surround him with.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good take. Kind of agree with that a lot. So number 5, I don't like Dwayne Haskins as much as a lot of people do, and I'm going to get into why that is. 6'3", 220 out of Ohio State. He has excellent arm strength. He's well built. He looks the way you want a quarterback to look. He's tough, stands tall, and is in command of the pocket. He can launch it deep, has explosive potential in his arm. He's looked a lot more natural and comfortable in his reads and motions over the last few games that I've seen, and he has flashes of pure dominance, but on the contrary of that, he's a very raw prospect. Needs a lot of reps, a lot of refinement to still be undertaken by coaching staff. Inconsistent due to lack of some experience. His accuracy isn't exactly where you want it to be. He needs to work on the technique of his footwork and the film room work needed to get his head ready for a complicated NFL play is going to be plenty. He should sit his rookie season if at all possible, and he's a lot less mobile than other prospects with a 40 time about 5 seconds. My veteran pro comparison for him is Joe Flacco. I have a mid to late third round grade on him. He's an experimental player. I'm projecting him to go in the mid first round because that's what teams are into right now, kind of like Kyler Murray as well. But very high upside, very high risk as well.
Yeah, I gotta say, it's really refreshing to hear you say that because I watched him play and then I just keep reading all these takes about how like far ahead he is and everything like that, how well he does it, like reading the field pre-snap, going through his progressions and all of that. And I watched the film and I just didn't really see it. And you're right, I think Joe Flacco is a very good comparison, honestly. He has a very strong arm, like you said, and I saw him make a few throws that are just out of this world because of how good his arm strength is. But in general, I didn't really see, and obviously I'm giving him a pass because he's the youngest quarterback in his class. He is only a sophomore. But I didn't really see him communicate with his offensive line too often pre-snap, so a lot of what he did felt very scripted. And it really did feel like he often looked to his first or second option only. I saw him stare down a lot of his targets. And kind of similar to my issue with Kyler Murray, and I know it's a little unfair because you work with what you work with, but he had so much talent surrounding him at Ohio State. He had plenty of time to sit in the pocket, throw. His game against Michigan, you look at the box score, and his stat line was phenomenal, but a lot of his action was just kind of dumping it off on a 7-yard crossing route, and then a receiver taking it 10, 15, 20 yards and really just padding his stats. So when it comes to just consistent consistent good decisions, consistent ball placement, I didn't really see it. And of course, there's going to be some examples of where he made some really impressive reads and everything like that. But of course you are. When you're coached by Urban Meyer and when you're on a team that's got, a great offensive line, you've got time to throw the ball, of course there's going to be times where you're going to display your talent. All of these quarterbacks are very talented. I do still have kind of like a late first, early second round grade on him just because of his unlimited potential. He could very well be the best quarterback in this class. I feel like you can say that about a lot of guys. Who knows what he'll be able to accomplish in a few years with the right coaching staff. And I think he's going to end up going top 5 just because of kind of the way he's been hyped up, the physical traits that he displays, and the fact that he's so young, so you kind of see him as like the biggest, best long-term investment. But I'm definitely not seeing this future franchise guy that a lot of people seem to be seeing.
He's definitely not the ready-made franchise guy. He's going to need a lot of development, and he should not go a team that really needs a quarterback right now. Like, look at Jacksonville Jaguars just signed Nick Foles, but teams like the Giants, you can sit behind Eli, but you kind of want a player to be ready to start next season. So, do you want to give me your top 5? Because that was mine.
Yeah, sure. Just give me 1 sec. I want to open up my rankings. All right, so looking at my top 5 right now, this is how I have it. I have Ryan Finley as my number 1, and this is subject to change. I'll rewatch some of these players before the final draft. My final big board I'll put out a few days before the draft. But right now, I've got Ryan Finley as my number 1. I have Dwayne Haskins as my number 2. I've got Will Grier as my number 3. We didn't really talk about him at all, so I'll just be really quick. I really like Will Grier. Kind of the way you feel about Drew Lock is the way I feel about Will Grier, where he's just very well-rounded. He's a baller. I saw him just make some clutch plays as well. Very accurate deep ball. Good enough athlete. Nothing, kind of similar to how I felt about Ryan Finley as well. Nothing about him that really stood out, but at the same time, he just kind of is a very well-rounded quarterback, and I can see him, he had to play in a lot of shootouts as well, playing in the Big 12. Obviously didn't go up against some great defenses either, but I liked what I saw from him. I've got Kyler Murray at 4, and I've got Drew Lock at 5. But I will tell you right now, those 5 are all pretty much interchangeable. That's how I've got late first-round grades on all of them, because all of them I see as the type of quarterbacks where you throw them on the Cardinals right now, the way they were last year, they wouldn't be successful. That team was a dumpster fire. But if you took them and put them on the Steelers and told them, hey, in a year you're going to be on this team with this great offensive line, this great receiving core, and a good running back, and a pretty good coaching staff, I think that they could be successful and get them to 10, 11 wins in a year or two with, maybe a year to digest information. So I think all of them have potential. I know it's kind of a cop-out to give them all the same grade, but that's kind of how I feel. For all of them, it's really going to be contingent on where they end up landing.
I think you're not terribly wrong there. I haven't seen as much of Will Grier as I should, and once I do that, I might also change my rankings again. I gotta say, Dwayne Haskins barely made it, though. I mean, I was about to put Will Grier, and even guys like I look at guys like Jackson, Stick, and even Jake Browning. I like Jake Browning a lot more than people do. But what I wanted to mention is about the quarterback class that we're looking at. I think Josh Rosen is the best quarterback that's available to the Cardinals this offseason, honestly. Yeah. And that's a very, very unpopular opinion. A lot of people don't want to hear that. People are on the Kyler Murray train, but I believe it's a mistake to trade Josh Rosen. I think if you're the Cardinals, you either like one defensive end so much that it's worth the first pick, or you trade down, take the value, and then go with Josh Rosen. It looks like they're not going to do it, but it's a very weak quarterback class just because the quarterback position is so inflated in its value because the position has become exponentially more important over the years. This class is by no means anywhere near last year's, which is one of the better ones. And so I believe it's kind of a tinted view because Josh Rosen is the best one available.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, we go back and look at what Josh Rosen did last year. Like, it's pretty unfair. We want to call him a bust. Plenty of people do. But you look at the situation he was thrown in. I don't think Tom Brady would have won 7 games with that roster. I don't know what Aaron Rodgers would have done with that roster. That roster, that coaching, it was an absolute mess. The poor kid was under pressure 24/7. And looking at this quarterback class and looking at last year's, maybe it's just revisionist history. I don't know. I don't think I would have had – I know I wouldn't have had any of these quarterbacks ahead of Sam Darnold. I know I wouldn't have had any above Josh Rosen. And I don't think I would have had any of them ranked ahead of Josh Allen based on what I saw. And quite frankly, I probably would have had Baker Mayfield ahead of just about all of them. Maybe Ryan Finley, but again, I don't really want to admit that now because of how well Baker looked his rookie year. And even Lamar Jackson, I honestly think Lamar Jackson was a better prospect than Kyler Murray is. I saw Lamar Jackson really do more with less. He showed a lot more pre-snap ability. Maybe Kyler Murray has a more accurate ball, but Lamar Jackson just kind of had a more well-rounded game, in my opinion, than Kyler Murray does. I think that we're really overvaluing all these quarterbacks because, like you said, it's just such an inflated position, and so many teams need either a current option or a future option.
Oh, yeah, it's a good take. I think for me personally, I think Drew Lock might have made number 5, but that's about it. I take Mayfield, Allen, Darnold, and Rosen over all the guys in this one. And even when I think I said that even when Justin Herbert was still expected to come out this year, that the top 4 from last year are going to be the top 4 if they were in this year's draft as well. So I think that's it for quarterbacks so far. We're going to get into more position groups maybe in a few weeks or something when we get into more film studying before the draft. Kind of get that top prospect covered, and maybe we'll do a first-round mock draft if we get the time to.
That'd be great.
But a lot of development also going on in the free agency market right now. So the day that this is recorded, free agency has just started. We had Antonio Brown to the Raiders, first of all. I guess it's the biggest storyline so far. What do you think?
Yeah, I kind of have two different feelings on this. I understand if you want to look at it from a micro standpoint, you can really say, hey, the Raiders, they traded Amari Cooper, got a first-round pick, and then turned a third-round pick into Antonio Brown. That's kind of impressive, and I get that. But in the end, I will say I was a big defender, one of the few defenders when John Gruden went out and traded Khalil Mack. I actually respected the fact that he basically was saying no one player aside from an elite quarterback is worth that much money, and I would rather surround this team with just good players, build it from scratch, and not pay Khalil Mack a historically large contract, even though he's so talented. I didn't agree with the trade because I think that when you have a star edge rusher like that, you need to keep them, especially when he's so versatile. But I respected the philosophy of we're not going to treat star players and give up a sixth of our cap space just for one pass rusher. I'd rather have 4 guys that are 70 to 80% of Khalil Mack than one Khalil Mack. I get that. And then you go out this year and you trade away and you bring in Antonio Brown and you give him all that money. And sure, it's a shorter term deal, but you're basically giving the same amount of money you would give to Khalil Mack in the short term to Antonio Brown. And that's where you're telling me that you don't actually have a good philosophy. You're just kind of winging it. I really don't like the move for the Raiders. I don't think they're ready to just invest. They do have draft picks, and I think maybe in the end, Antonio Brown's going to be fine there. He's going to put up some good stats. He's a nice weapon for Derek Carr. But I really don't understand what they're doing. They go out, they spend a massive amount of money on Trent Brown, too, at left tackle, who's been kind of historically okay, had one decent season in New England where everyone does well. If you told me that money could have just gone to Khalil Mack or is going to those 2 guys, just pay Khalil Mack. Now I just don't get it. It makes the deal look so much worse in hindsight. What do you think of all of this?
Well, I do love Antonio Brown, obviously. I think there's really no way to not justify signing Antonio Brown. But if there's a way, it's for a team that needs absolutely everything but one individual big star. And if that one team exists right now, it's the Oakland Raiders, because they looked terrible last year. They're the worst team in the NFL coming out of that season by a good margin, having traded their best players away. I get you want to replace Amari Cooper, but I also know John Gruden. Like, one thing I know of John Gruden is that he doesn't like personality on his roster. He's an old school coach. He's kind of like Bill Belichick in that kind of regard. Can you imagine Antonio Brown in New England with the Belichick regime? I can. And John Gruden is scarcely similar to that. So I'm really curious to see how that's going to work out. The Raiders might be in the market for a new quarterback if John Gruden wants to go that way. Wasn't on my list of team fits. There was a brief rumor about the Buffalo Bills apparently being close to trading for him, but Brown didn't want to go there.
Yep.
So, looks like he got at least somewhat what he wanted. He might have wanted to move to a little bit different spot in the same area, if you know what I'm saying.
Oh, yes.
But no, he's with the Raiders. So, I of course, being a 49er fan, I kind of wanted him to come there, but then again, it's a lot of money. There's risks to it. I understand why they weren't interested in it, and I guess it's a smart strategy. I still like the strategy more than the Raiders strategy, though I think Antonio Brown is going to do big things. I think he's going to do good. If it's going to be worth it, we'll see kind of how that dynamic works out. It's very questionable, but I think the Steelers also will kind of breathe a sigh of relief now that this is over. I think Le'Veon Bell's going to be gone. Antonio Brown's going to be gone. They're going to be weaker, but they're going to be less of a focal point of all the drama going around the NFL from a week-to-week basis. So that can only help them. And the Raiders' future is as questionable as it's ever been, but Antonio Brown is a good addition no matter how you slice it.
Yeah, no, I can agree with most of that. In the end, yeah, he's a good player. You want good players. Again, I just don't necessarily agree with their whole philosophy from the top down, but,
All right, let's look at this other one, though. Nick Foles. Getting the big money. What was your initial reaction to that?
You see, I'm not necessarily sure. I kind of get it, because, again, we just spent so much time talking about how this isn't a very strong quarterback class. There's not really an option for a guy you can bring in as a win-now player. And the Jaguars really do have a win-now roster. Their offensive line, good enough. Receiving core, yet to be seen. I think that Keelan Cole and some of the other guys are actually a little better than we're giving them credit for, just because Blake Bortles was so bad. Running back, good enough. They have Leonard Fournette, and obviously their defense is elite at times. Wasn't quite what it was 2 years ago last year, but it's still a very talented defense. So you want to go get a guy who's a proven winner, a guy who won a Super Bowl MVP, who's still not necessarily out of his prime. That's fine. I kind of wish they kind of pulled a Vikings and gave him a shorter deal and paid him even more. I would have rather them just give him a 2-year, fully guaranteed $50 million contract or a $55 million contract or something like that, because I don't necessarily think he's done enough overall to prove that he's a franchise guy long term, and they're giving him a lot of money and a lot of guaranteed money, investing a lot in him, and kind of ruining their opportunity to draft a guy like maybe Trevor Lawrence in a few years, or a guy like Jake Fromm. Although whether or not they're still going to be top prospects will be remain to be seen. But if they want to give themselves a chance to win now, I think that Nick Foles was the best option, whether it be trade targets or guys on the market.
Oh, well, yeah, it's fair enough. I think that we're kind of in a pickle of a situation there with looking at the quarterback situation that they were presented with. Blake Bortles is not an option. And if you're looking at the draft, it's historically weak. And free agency, you have Nick Foles. You have Nick Mullins to your disposal. You have Tyrod Taylor. There's names out there that you know will perform better for you than likely all of these rookies coming out. And as you said, they are the Super Bowl window is closing on the Jaguars. They are still in win now mode. They have to be. Last season was underwhelming, and if it really all came down to quarterback play, which a lot of it did, but they did regress as a team from the way they performed in 2017. I think Nick Foles is a shot. Now the question is going to be how are they looking at the future? Are they drafting quarterback this year? Are they waiting to draft quarterback next year? Because if they're still competing, they're not going to get Tua next year. They're going to get Trevor Lawrence the year after. So what's kind of the long-term future for the Jaguars there?
Yeah. If I'm the Jaguars, honestly, depending on, I won't say I'm not prepared enough to where I know exactly what their draft situation is, but if you're sitting there in the 4th round and Tyree Jackson's still available, you might as well just take a flyer on him. He's the type of guy that could end up being – he has the highest potential pretty much of any quarterback in this class. Also the highest floor, or the lowest floor. But why not? You've already got Nick Foles. You want Tyree Jackson sitting for at least 2 years probably to really learn. And then maybe you at least have a chance to have a guy. Or maybe you let him walk. Maybe you have some trade bait if some targets are going out. But yeah, in the end, they're going to be too good to really get their hands. I mean, with Nick Foles, I don't know if they're going to be a playoff team even or like a Super Bowl contender, but they're not going to be trash. They're not going to be a 4-win team. He's just proven that he's good enough at least, and they have a good enough roster. So it's going to be very interesting to kind of see. I'm afraid they might have trapped themselves in limbo, but who knows? Maybe we'll see the Super Bowl MVP version of Nick Foles for a majority of the season, and then we'll all end up looking a little foolish.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, kind of those classes where the quarterback classes is somewhat weak is typically pretty much a purgatory state for a lot of teams that are looking to get a good quarterback now. We already said it last year when the Giants didn't go for a quarterback at the top of the draft. Next year's class is not going to be good. We know that. Eli Manning is on the decline. I'm surprised that he's still considered for a starting spot in New York. And those are kind of the teams that are struggling when it comes down to certain things like this. I've also seen the Jaguars being connected to Golden Tate to kind of get Nick Foles that extra target in the receiving corps, which is one of the weaker units on the team, arguably. Kind of strengthen up that offense a little bit. But yeah, it's a big question mark over the Jaguars for sure. Another big name that's been out there a lot is, actually two, would be Le'Veon Bell and Odell Beckham. So do you have any predictions on where those guys are going to end up?
Yeah, so Odell Beckham, I've been seeing a lot of trade rumors, and I mean, in the end, I look at Odell Beckham, I look at a few of the best fits. I mean, I look at teams that have draft capital and teams that have cap space. I mean, you look at possibly the San Francisco 49ers. They're a team that's been kind of rumored to be interested in adding him to their roster. And also, it's going to sound kind of crazy because I know we kind of talked about them not normally liking personalities, but why wouldn't the New England Patriots throw a few draft picks for him? I mean, they have so many draft picks. At this point in Tom Brady's career, what's the point of bringing in projects? You're in win-now mode. And as much as I'm usually against paying a big-name, big personality wide receiver, they did it with Randy Moss, and Tom Brady set the record at the time for touchdown passes in a season. He's got maybe 1-2 more years left. Why don't you throw 4 draft picks at the Giants, 3 draft picks at the Giants, bring in a guy who's guaranteed to be a star for this team? You can mortgage the future when you're the New England Patriots. You have 6 Super Bowls already, and you're going for number 7. Why wouldn't you just do it? So I see the Patriots and the Niners kind of as those two teams that could really go in. Maybe the Colts as well. They have a ton of cap space. They have a lot of promising young talent already. They could definitely afford to give up a draft pick or 2 if they want to bring in a guy. So those are really my 3 options. As for Le'Veon Bell, I'm just going to come out and say I don't think a smart team is going to pay him that much money to be on their roster. So when I think of where Le'Veon Bell is going to end up, I think of kind of teams that are not historically very well run. So I'm not entirely sure where I think he'd go. I mean, I could see the Raiders just throwing cap space at him. They have a ton of cap space still. Maybe the Jets, although I think they've actually made some pretty smart moves for the most part over the year. The one team that is actually well run that I could see maybe making a run for him, I've seen some rumblings about the Philadelphia Eagles. They're kind of in a rare position where they have so much talent already that they can afford to take a flyer on him. If they were to sign him, I could definitely see it being a very short-term deal, very front-loaded, bring him in for a year or 2, see if they can go on a Super Bowl run, and then bring somebody else in. So those are kind of the 3 teams. And then I do have to throw in the Colts again just because they have so much cap space, but I honestly think Chris Ballard is smart enough where he's like, hey, Marlon Mack at $1.5 million, $2 million a year, whatever he's getting paid, is way better than Le'Veon Bell at $15 million a year. But what about you?
So Let's look at Odell Beckham first. A counterpoint to what you said, they're not going to do it because it's not the Patriot way. I'm not sure they won't, but that's kind of what they've been living by. It's not the Bill Belichick kind of move to make. Like you said, mortgaging, dumping the future for the here and now. I get that they want to win, but they've always been resourceful with what they're doing. And like dumping all their resources into Odell Beckham doesn't seem like in character for them, and they haven't broken their character for 20 years. I get Randy Moss, but I don't see him do that now. The smart thing, the Patriot thing to do would be to trade for Josh Rosen and develop him behind Brady and do another 20 years of what they've been doing.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
That would be the Patriot thing to do, and let the Cardinals go all in on Kyler Murray, because that's usually how the good teams stay good and the bad teams stay bad. It's those decisions.
Yeah. Absolutely.
As harsh as it might sound. As for the 49ers, I'd be fine with Beckham. He's my second pick. He's my second choice behind Antonio Brown. But I know he's incredibly talented as well, as long as it doesn't take that second overall pick, because that second overall pick is essentially a first overall pick, with Kyler Murray likely going to the Cardinals. And you've got your choice of the best edge rushing class in decades at a position that you most direly need, and you're in a good position, or the best position you could want to be in the draft. The quarterback class is weak. You already have your guy in place. You got your selection of whatever you want: Nick Bosa, Josh Allen, Rashawn Gary, whatever you're looking at. So that second pick overall to me is a no-no, especially if we are looking at the edge class that is coming up. But if they're gonna give up Odell Beckham for Solomon Thomas in a third rounder, I'll be more than happy to make that happen, because he's a big time explosive playmaker and he'd do well on any team. As for Le'Veon Bell, I also do like the Jets. The thing is that Sam Darnold needs a lot. Like, he needs a lot of stuff to go his way around him for him to kind of be able to show that potential, because the Jets, aside from kind of Darnold and a few select defensive players, were terrible last year. They were one of the worst teams in the league. And I've said it before, they need a lot overall in coaching and in support to serve him right, to kind of allow him to show what he can do. And a very strong running game with a decent offensive line would go a long way to take some of that pressure off of Darnold's shoulders and allow him to flourish in that offense. I've also heard Bell connected to a couple of other teams. Eagles, I don't really see that much, but there's a lot of teams that do need a running back. Now the question, of course, being who'd be willing to pay a running back that much, especially one that's been run into the ground, figuratively and literally, in Pittsburgh for a couple of years without ever getting paid a lot, because they were taking advantage of that rookie deal, which is an entire issue by itself. But I think the Bell investment is a short-term one rather than a long-term one, so I might actually see him go to a win-now team. Now, the situation with Leonard Fournette seems to have resolved itself in Jacksonville, but that was a brief candidate for me.
Yeah.
I can also see a team like the Vikings go after him, or someone to kind of add that extra presence to kind of give him that last push to kind of make it happen in the playoffs and go above and beyond. I don't think he's going to be in Pittsburgh. I think it's fair to say. There's no concrete things that I've heard about him so far. Raiders are always a possibility. I've never excluded. Again, not sure how much I like that move. They got to look more at building the roster in a kind of a broad dimension than in a high dimension. Kind of adding a couple of stars isn't going to be the way to do it for them, because they have a lot of needs. But yeah, Le'Veon Bell, I'm very curious. I'm not sure at all where he's going to end up.
Yeah, no, I agree with all that. It's really a wild card. And I'm curious, but I will say that I don't really think he adds much value to wherever he's put on, to be honest.
Alright, so I think that's gonna do it for today. It's been a long video already. Top 5 quarterbacks, a couple of free agent discussions. We have some other names also. Landon Collins at the Redskins, Quan Alexander with the 49ers, some defensive additions, all of which I really liked and I think are gonna be good fits. But maybe we'll cover more of that in a future video. We're gonna see to get this up as soon as possible, and then maybe let us know in the comments what the next position is you want us to cover. You want to have a close look at DK Metcalf, the receiver groups, Maybe you want to see more about the defensive line, those historically strong edge rushers, because there's a lot of review and a lot of ranking to do for those guys as well, which are going to also have a strong impact on the top of the draft. And also let me know your quarterback opinions. What's your top 5 rankings? How wrong am I on Kyler Murray? How is he going to transform the league? Let me hear it. And I'll be ready to debate in the comments. I believe Brian always is hanging out in the comments as well. So if you got some questions to him, you can ask some questions. Also go over to MadMen Sports, MadMen Scouting. Check out his channel. He's also covering the draft, covering the combine. I've seen a couple of scouting reports on his video already. And I'm also going to be hopefully back to uploading more regularly now. And it's going to be an exciting season. Free agency Among Us draft coming up. Thanks to Brian for showing up. And we'll see you in the next one.